A land divided Vietnam before the storm. Welcome to Explore Vortex. Today we'll delve into the history of the Vietnam War. This is the story of a nation that has weathered countless storms, both natural and man-made, and has emerged with a spirit unbroken. Vietnam, a nation with a rich history and ancient culture, found itself caught in the crossfire of global power struggles in the 20th century. Its people, known for their resilience and deep-rooted traditions, faced challenges that would test their very essence. For centuries, Vietnam had endured periods of Chinese rule and internal divisions. The influence of Chinese culture and governance left an indelible mark on Vietnamese society, shaping its language, art, and political structures. By the 19th century, French influence began to grow, eventually leading to full-fledged colonial control. The French brought with them new technologies and ideas, but also a heavy hand of oppression and exploitation. This foreign domination sowed the seeds of resentment and nationalism that would shape Vietnam's destiny for decades to come. The Vietnamese people, inspired by a desire for self-determination, began to organize and resist their colonial rulers. The Vietnamese people yearned for independence and self-determination, but their path to freedom would be long and arduous, marked by conflict and sacrifice. Heroes emerged from the shadows, leading their compatriots in a struggle that would span generations. The stage was set for a conflict that would become a defining moment of the Cold War era. As global superpowers vied for influence, Vietnam became a battleground for ideologies with devastating consequences for its people. Vietnam's story is a tragic reminder of how international power struggles can have devastating consequences for nations caught in the middle, leaving behind a legacy of pain and division. Yet, through it all, the spirit of the Vietnamese people has remained unbroken, a testament to their enduring strength and resilience. The shadow of Empire French colonialism in Vietnam. This period marked a significant chapter in the history of both France and Vietnam, leaving a lasting impact on the region. France's colonial ambitions in Southeast Asia led to the gradual takeover of Vietnam in the late 19th century. The French sought to expand their influence and control over the region, driven by both economic interests and a desire for geopolitical dominance. The French viewed Vietnam as a source of valuable resources and a strategic foothold in the region. They were particularly interested in the country's agricultural and mineral wealth, which they believed could significantly boost the French economy. They established a system of economic exploitation, extracting resources such as rubber, rice, and tin. These resources were then exported to France, enriching the colonial power while leaving the local population impoverished. While imposing their culture and administration on Vietnamese society, French language, customs, and educational systems were introduced, often at the expense of local traditions and practices. This exploitation fueled resentment among the Vietnamese people, who increasingly saw French rule as oppressive and unjust. The harsh working conditions and heavy taxation imposed by the French further exacerbated the situation. The French colonial administration implemented policies that disrupted traditional Vietnamese society, creating a class of wealthy landowners and a growing urban proletariat. This new social structure led to significant changes in the way of life for many Vietnamese people. Education was primarily limited to the elite, and many Vietnamese people felt excluded from the political and economic spheres of their own country. The French-controlled education system aimed to create a small, loyal elite while keeping the majority of the population uneducated and subservient. As the 20th century dawned, a growing sense of nationalism began to emerge, laying the groundwork for resistance against French rule. Intellectuals and leaders started to organize and inspire the masses, leading to the eventual struggle for independence that would shape Vietnam's future. A nation awakens, Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh. From the ashes of French colonialism arose a new generation of Vietnamese leaders determined to fight for their nation's independence. Among them was Ho Chi Minh, a charismatic revolutionary who would become a symbol of Vietnamese resistance. Ho Chi Minh, deeply influenced by communist ideology, sought to liberate Vietnam from foreign domination and create a unified, independent nation. In 1941, Ho Chi Minh founded the Viet Minh, a coalition of nationalist and communist groups dedicated to achieving independence. The Viet Minh gained widespread support among the Vietnamese people, who yearned for freedom from both the Japanese occupation during World War II and French colonial rule. The Viet Minh's guerrilla warfare tactics proved highly effective against both the Japanese and later the French forces. The Cold War chessboard. Vietnam becomes a pawn. In the grand game of global politics, Vietnam found itself caught between two superpowers, each vying for dominance. As World War II ended, a new global conflict emerged, the Cold War, a battle of ideologies between the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. This ideological struggle was not just confined to Europe, but spread across the globe, affecting many nations, including Vietnam. This rivalry would have a profound impact on Vietnam's fate, turning the country into a proxy battleground for these superpowers. The conflict in Vietnam was not merely a local issue, but a reflection of the larger Cold War dynamics, where both the US and the Soviet Union sought to expand their influence. The United States, fearing the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, saw Vietnam as a crucial domino in a regional struggle. The domino theory suggested that if one country fell to communism, neighboring countries would follow, leading to a widespread shift in power. The Truman Doctrine, announced in 1947, committed the United States to containing the spread of communism worldwide. This policy marked a significant shift in American foreign policy, emphasizing the need to support free peoples resisting subjugation by armed minorities or outside pressures. This policy, driven by the fear of a domino effect in Southeast Asia, laid the groundwork for increasing American involvement in Vietnam. The U.S. began to see Vietnam as a critical front in the fight against communism, leading to a series of escalating commitments. The United States began providing financial and military aid to the French in their efforts to regain control of Vietnam, a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. This support was part of a broader strategy to contain communism, but it also entangled the U.S. in a complex and protracted conflict that would last for decades. Section 5. The Geneva Accords, a temporary peace. After years of fighting, the First Indochina War between France and the Viet Minh culminated in a decisive Viet Minh victory at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. This defeat forced France to the negotiating table, leading to the Geneva Accords, which temporarily divided Vietnam into two zones: the Communist North, led by Ho Chi Minh, and the non-Communist South, supported by the United States. The Geneva Accords stipulated that nationwide elections should be held in 1956 to reunify the country. However, this crucial provision was never implemented, as the United States, fearing a communist victory, backed the South Vietnamese government's refusal to hold the elections. This failure to uphold the accords further deepened the divisions within Vietnam and set the stage for renewed conflict. Section 6. Diem and the Domino Theory. America's growing involvement. In the wake of the Geneva Accords, the United States threw its support behind Ngo Dinh Diem, the staunchly anti-communist leader of South Vietnam. Diem, however, proved to be an unpopular and autocratic ruler, alienating many South Vietnamese with his repressive policies and favoritism towards Catholics in a predominantly Buddhist country. The United States, driven by the domino theory, the belief that the fall of one Southeast Asian nation to communism would lead to the collapse of others, continued to provide substantial military and economic aid to Diem's government. This support, however, failed to quell the growing insurgency in the South, led by the Communist National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong. Section 7. The Gulf of Tonkin, a turning point. In August 1964, a controversial incident in the Gulf of Tonkin off the coast of North Vietnam provided the pretext for a dramatic escalation of American involvement in the war. The U.S. destroyer USS Maddox reported being attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. A second, even more dubious attack was reported 2 days later. Although the details of the incidents remain disputed to this day, the Johnson administration used them to justify a massive bombing campaign against North Vietnam and the passage of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which granted President Lyndon B. Johnson broad war powers without a formal declaration of war from Congress. This marked a turning point in the conflict, transforming it from a proxy war into a full-fledged American intervention. Section 8. Escalation and Intervention. The war intensifies. With the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in hand, President Johnson dramatically increased the number of American ground troops in Vietnam, reaching over 500,000 by 1968. The war intensified. evolving into a brutal conflict characterized by guerrilla warfare, search and destroy missions, and heavy bombing campaigns. American soldiers, many of them young draftees, found themselves fighting a tenacious enemy in a hostile and unfamiliar environment. The Viet Cong, masters of guerrilla tactics, utilized a vast network of tunnels and blended in with the civilian population, making it difficult for American forces to distinguish between friend and foe. The war exacted a heavy toll on both sides, with countless Vietnamese civilians caught in the crossfire.